So far, I'm yet to see a reasonable argument for veganism. When I hear statements like this, I think back to a couple of hundred years ago, the southern plantation owners in the United States and the kind of arguments they would make for slavery. They were parallel to the kind of arguments people make for killing animals to this day. They would say things like, it's a form of neighborliness, which is this idea that you're taking these Africans, these Negro, from their homeland and you're bringing them to a more sophisticated, civilized society and having them around you to uplift them and introduce them to God and so forth. They would say things like, it's necessary in order to ensure our economy. We can't get rid of slavery. It's been around for so long. And they would say things like, yeah, there's no reasonable argument as to why you should not have slavery. And granted, look, I would actually agree if your idea of reasonable has to do with it benefiting you. I mean, I can't think of a reasonable argument why I shouldn't have slaves because it benefits me and there's so much great things that come from that. Now, granted, you can make the argument that you're going to have a lot of slave revolts and it's going to bring about a lot of negativity. You might have these Negroes coming after you, trying to kill you because they don't like the idea of being slaves. So that might be a reasonable argument. And granted, animals, they're pretty much in a situation where they can't really offer much of a burden to us, at least in their resistance. So, maybe that's not such a reasonable argument. But if we're looking at reasonableness purely along the lines of, well, it benefits me, therefore I can't see anything wrong with it, that makes perfect sense. But if we're looking at this morally speaking, and this is the basic premise behind veganism. Now, granted, I realize there's some vegans that take this stuff to a crazy level, but the basic premise is that you shouldn't slaughter these animals because you wouldn't want it done to yourself. They're sentient beings that are worthy of life. And the only way that people can justify doing this horrible abuse towards these animals or slaves is one, to say that, well, it benefits me. It's very useful. We can make the economy a lot better. There are all these benefits that I get from it, and I treat them nicely. You hear people saying things like, well, it's a form of compassion because ultimately I'm providing something for these animals and they're getting something out of it. It's humane slaughter. This oxymoron that you can somehow do something that is inherently wrong the right way, like strangle someone to death. It's crazy. It reminds me of what Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, would say when the Nazis were pulling Jews by the hair into the concentration camps. He would tell them not to pull their hair and that you should treat them better. He wouldn't be against pulling them into the concentration camps, or the gas chambers rather. No, he'd just say that, no, you got to do this more humanely. It's the same kind of logic, right? Fundamentally, it's wrong. But you see, this is the frustrating thing about the argumentation I hear towards veganism, vegetarianism, call it what you will. So many people throw away this idea of actual morality, like human rights, this idea that, well, it's in principle wrong to do something. And they always make these utilitarian arguments like, oh, but look what we can get from this. Look how it's going to benefit our lifestyle. And look, it's going to take my ability to enjoy the beautiful meat, when fundamentally it's wrong. And there's no right way to do something that is wrong. And if you have a look at the arguments that were made for slavery, they are paralleled with the arguments that people make for slaughtering animals. That one, it's necessary to ensure our economy. Two, it's a form of neighborliness. It's compassionate. Three, well, there's no way to get away from this thing. It's been going on for such a long time. It's tradition, right? It's just part of life. It's the circle of life, all right? And what's interesting is that the same mentality that allowed us, and I say us because I don't think there's a distinction between you or I. We're humans. We're all part of this same race here. And the mentality was that they were just animals. In fact, slaves were considered to be 3/5 human in the Constitution of the United States for quite some time. They were basically delegated to not being actual beings that were worthy of rights. And this is what allowed us to commit so much of the horrific violence that we perpetrated on these people. And so many of the terminology that we use in present day in animal agriculture comes directly from the terminology we used around slavery, like chattel, cattle. Chattel was the term they used for how they would essentially move these slaves. And so many of the practices, the mentality, the very mindset of, well, it's mine, reasonably speaking, I can't see any reason not to kill and slaughter these animals because I get so much out of it, as opposed to the fundamental principle, which is that it's wrong. I mean, if someone asked me that they can't see any reasonable argument not to rape someone, I would think they were completely insane. Yeah, you might be right. You know, it might benefit the world, sure, by having more children, by raping someone and allowing there to be more offspring. Sure, it might be a great thing for the planet because you can have more offspring and you can maybe train them to do amazing things to make the world a better place. But you know what? It's wrong. You can't rape people. Just like you cannot kill sentient beings. I mean, you can, technically speaking, but morally speaking, it's something you shouldn't do because it violates their natural rights to life. If you believe in human rights, then you should believe in animal rights because animal rights is the logical extension of human rights. Fundamentally, that we all want to live in peace. Making all these justifications that someone else does it, that it's going to be beneficial towards the planet and so forth is irrelevant. And I could say that, yeah, there are many reasons, many rational reasons as to why a plant-based diet would be better for the planet, but that's neither here or there. Fundamentally, it's wrong. That's why it should not be done. And it's something that I find a lot of people lose sight of in this conversation.